All right, let's try that again. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Atlanta History Center. I love Atlanta. Everyone always says hi to you when you say hi to them. Well, first of all, thank you so much for venturing out in the rain and the cold and the people who forget how to drive when it rains. We really, really appreciate you coming out. Yeah, we've been fighting flat tires back here and everything else. So, we really got tested today, but we're all here now. We're all really excited. I'm Claire Haley. I'm with Atlanta History Center. I curate our Author Talk series. And when one of the publicists from HarperCollins reached out to ask if we would host these three ladies on a panel, I said, just twist my arm a little bit harder. Why don't you? So we're so excited that they were all able to join us here tonight. So tonight they're going to talk about their three respective books. You probably saw that those are all available for purchase. I see many of you with your stack, yes, over there. If you haven't yet gotten a copy of one of the books or all of the books, they are all 25% off tonight only. Christmas. Thanksgiving is next week, y'all. So if you want to lock in your Christmas gifts a little bit early, we have some for purchase out there, and you can get them signed tonight as well. They will also make some time for questions, so be thinking of those as they talk tonight. And I'm going to briefly introduce each of the three ladies that are sitting here on this couch tonight and then turn it over to them for what's going to be a really fun conversation this evening. So I will start with the ladies closest to me, Miss Piper Huguley. She brings to life the women of the Civil War to civil rights to life with historical romances, Home to Milford College and Migrations of the Heart series, and with her latest historical fiction, which is the one for sale out there tonight, By Her Own Design, a Library Journal starred review novel about Anne Lowe. She is a multiple-time Golden Heart finalist, and if you want to know more about the history behind her books, she has a great blog at piperhuguley.com. She lives in Atlanta with her husband and son. On the middle of the couch there, yes, welcome Piper. In the middle of the couch there, we have Vanessa Riley back for her third appearance at Atlanta History Center. So we're very happy to have her back. She's an award-winning author of over 23 books, including Island Queen, which is for sale out there tonight, a Good Morning America Buzz pick. She has historical novels that showcase the hidden histories of Black women and women of color, emphasizing strong sisterhoods and dazzling multicultural communities. Her works are historical fiction, historical romance, historical mystery now too, and have been reviewed by the AAMBC, Washington Post, Entertainment Weekly, NPR, Publisher Weekly, and the New York Times. She's received starred reviews from Publisher Weekly and Library Journal. She's a former president of the Regency Fiction Writers, a member of the Georgia Writers Association, the Historical Novel Society, Crime Writers of Color, and on the board of directors of the Christian Book Lovers Retreat. She's an avid baker in all of her spare time. And you can find her writing on her southern porch with proper amounts of caffeine. Welcome, Vanessa. And last but certainly not least, we're so excited to welcome Wanda Morris for her new book, Anywhere You Run. She's the acclaimed author. Her previous book came out last year, All of Her Little Secrets, has been praised by Karen Slaughter, another really great Atlanta writer. It was brilliantly nuanced and reviewed by, get ready for this, the Boston Globe, LA Times, New York Times, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Seattle Times, and South Florida Sentinel, among others.
And they liked it.
It has received, yes, that's important to note, for good reasons. It has it was named one of the best books of 2021 by Hudson Booksellers and selected as the #1 top pick for library reads by librarians across the country, whom we all know are the best readers. It was selected as a Book Buzz pick by Good Morning America, serialized in Entertainment Weekly, and a Marie Claire Book Club pick. It won several awards and has been nominated for the Anthony Award, the Strand Critics Award, and the McCavey Award. It's shortlisted for the Crooks Corner Book Prize. It has been optioned for a limited series on Showtime. So I'm sure someone's going to ask all about that. Starring and executive produced by 3-time Emmy winner Uzo Aduba. Excuse me. But the book she's here discussing tonight is Anywhere You Run, Also has gotten many accolades. 15 standout historical fiction books to read this year by Oprah Daily. Named one of Amazon's best books of 2022. Starred reviews from Publishers Weekly, Booklist, Library Journal, and has been compared to even Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. So incredible book. She's a member of many, many associations and also lives here in Atlanta, Georgia. So I told you it was a lot, but I didn't want to shortchange any of these ladies. Please join me in welcoming tonight's featured authors, Wanda Morris, Vanessa Riley, and Piper Huguley.
First of all, I just want to thank you all for coming out. It's a wet, sucky, rainy night, and to see you wonderful readers in the house means the world to us. One of the things that I think you guys should know is the sorority of writers, of women writers, trying to bring these stories is very strong. And so tonight you're going to see my blessed friend Piper Huguley, you're going to see my blessed new friend Wanda Morris, and myself. We're going to talk about our journeys, and we're just going to have a very casual conversation. We'll let y'all in around 40-something odd minutes into this conversation. But we are in a very unique period in publishing. For a long time, you know, when you were writing something that was different, that told a different story, that wasn't, let's say, quote unquote, the enslavement pain porn story, that showed women of color doing exciting and different things, moving forward, you know, changing the world, there wasn't really an opportunity for that. But we're in a space and time that now they're saying, you know what? These stories are important. And you know what? You women, you black women, you women of color can tell these stories. And so I'm, once again, very humbled and very privileged to sit here with my sisters, and we're just going to invite you in a conversation. So I'm going to start with Piper. Yes, you're on the hot seat, girl.
I have no problems
and
with
you're
that.
looking good, by the way, I must
Thank
say. You know? Your journey for Anlo. I mean, this is, first of all, we think we know Anlo, right? We think we know her because she's well, you might not. That's true. You know, this is Jackie's designer. But what you've done in By Her Design is it's beyond that. You brought her back in ways that I think are so exciting. So tell us a little bit, for those who aren't familiar, tell us a little bit about Anne and why it was so important to bring that journey.
This is a woman who has, if you are a Kennedy aficionado, as I've been a Kennedy aficionado for a very long period of time, somehow doesn't make it into the pages of Jackie's biographies. And if she does make it into the pages of Jackie's biographies, then she's discussed as in Kitty Kelly's case, the family seamstress, or in other tomes, seamstress without her name being there. And in the Ladies' Home Journal issue in April 1961, she was called a colored seamstress. So it's been the case that this black woman who had to design Jackie's wedding dress, not just once, but twice, due to the fact that the roof of her shop opened up days before the wedding and ruined
Sabotage.
the bridal dress. And
I think
nine
it
of
was
the
sabotage.
bridesmaids'
I'm
dresses.
sorry. I think that was sabotage. Trying to
you
keep a
see
girl
the
down.
fight.
She got the big thing, and then all of a sudden the water. Come on now.
That's how I structured it in the book to make it interesting. But
That's interesting.
that's why I wrote it that way. In terms of that, so this accomplishment, and this is the thing. She wasn't just a seamstress. She was a bespoke designer to women of the social register, and had been that at that point for decades. She started out in Alabama and came from a family of women, black women, her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother, who this is what they did even when they were enslaved. They did the dresses of the wealthy and the well-known, the wives of the Alabama legislature and the first lady of the Alabama. So for her to just be taken out, removed, not seen in history. I thought it was a great wrong. And when I saw what her story was, it spoke to me that right away, this is a story that needs to be told, and a seed needs to be planted for her to be fully appreciated and developed and brought into not just fashion history, but history overall in terms of her artistry. So that is sort of her backstory, if you will. And as these ladies know, every story that you come across, but this is particularly true for if you're going to write biographical historical fiction, everybody's life doesn't make the cut necessarily in terms of the story.
Piper, you've used a term that you must define now for the folks.
Yes.
Biographical,
I'm about
historical fiction.
Yes, I'm about to. So this is a fiction that is based on a real person, using the real person's name and the events of their life, right? So many people talk about By Her Own Design as a biography. It's not. It is a fiction novel about Anne Lowe. To the point that the other day I found something else about her that didn't make the book, but might make the adaptation if that happens. So her life events, as some people have talked about them, upsetting or, that they were, that her life was up and down. Is what would make for someone's life to be a good novel, as opposed to some other people. So, yes, that's Anne Lowe, and she lived a long life for a black woman. Died in her 80s, and with my nerd self, I noticed that the day that she died was the day after Charles and Diana got engaged. I said, I wonder what she must have thought about that. And that's where I started the book and wrote the prologue that starts the book. In terms of thinking about her as missing that commission, not getting to put in for that commission. So,
No, and expertly done. For those writer nerds out here, I think that prologue is one of the best I've ever read. So, writing nerds, just throwing that out there. Now, Piper's done biographical historical fiction, and then this woman over here, she brings out her debut as a contemporary, and then she got the nerve to go back to the 60s with Violet and Marigold and talking about the Voter Rights Acts and the voter rights, and then you throw us in a bit of drama. So tell us a little bit about your current work and why.
Thank you. I have to echo what Vanessa said. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. So I did a contemporary novel and then decided contemporary dual timelines and then decided for my second book.
That's hard, boys and girls. Just putting it out there. That's hard.
I'll do historical multiple points of view. Crazy, I know. But, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Anywhere You Run is the story, I like to describe it as a cat and mouse thriller of two sisters coming of age in the Jim Crow South of 1964. The book opens with a very brutal scene. It is the murder of three civil rights activists, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, who had come to Mississippi to help black Mississippians get the right to vote. Against this backdrop, Violet Richards, one of the sisters, is also brutally attacked. But she decides to get revenge, and she kills her attacker. And
ain't nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. She realizes in 1964 Jim Crow Mississippi, she's not very likely to get any kind of justice. Self-defense is not going to be a defense for her, so she takes off running. Her sister Marigold is back in Jackson, and she's in a bit of a pickle too. She is unmarried and she's pregnant, which is a big no-no for girls in the 60s, good girls in the 60s. So when the police show up at her door looking for her sister Violet, she says, I might need to get out of town as well. And she heads north. under the misguided assumption that life will be better up north. Certainly, it won't be anything like Mississippi, and there won't be any discrimination, which she comes to find out in the book is, like I said, misguided. What the two women don't realize, however, is that there's a very dangerous man who has his own brand of dark secrets, and he is hot on their trail because he has a very unique motive for finding the two women. Now, my books are rooted in lots of dead bodies. Let's just put it out there. So
sometimes it got to be like that. I'm just sorry.
I write mystery and thriller, and apparently I have no problem with killing lots of people. I was once at I was once speaking, and somebody kind of asked the panel, tell us about your book. How many of you on the panel have 2 dead people in your book? And, a couple people raised their hand. 3 dead bodies. People raised their hand. I finally raised my hand when they got to 6, okay? So that's all just to let you know. But I do it in the context of the story, and it is to the value of the story. 1964, Jim Crow, Mississippi was, to say the least, a very unpleasant place. And one of the reasons why I opened the book with such a brutal scene is so that the reader is immersed immediately into the treachery and the horror of segregation. And it obviously winds up becoming instrumental in the story over the course of the book. But I want readers to understand that this is not, a happy-go-lucky story, because that was not a happy-go-lucky time for Black people in the South.
Exactly.
So tell us about your book, Vanessa.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. It's like books, right? Because this was a crazy year for me. I actually had 3 books came out this year, and so my very first hardcover mystery, Murder in Westminster. I want 30 books out that world. So I'm just putting y'all on notice, and I got bodies too, because I be killing folks in that one.
You killed 6 of them in one book?
I got up to 4. Okay, I got up to 4.
See, that's respectable.
And it was questionable. Some of those deaths are questionable. Was it suicide? Was it murder? Was it an accident? It's up to you to decide.
Genre expectations are so strange, because in my historical romance, I killed 1 person, and I'm still hearing about it.
You killed the wrong person. We like that woman you killed. That's your problem. I'm sorry. But going back to, so this year I was very fortunate. I had Sister Mother Warrior, which is about the 2 women who shaped the Haitian Revolution. We always hear about the men, Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Henri Christophe. But in my opinion, when you look at the history, if it was not for the women, you would not have this revolution. You would not have this moment in time where a nation of enslaved people throws off one of the military mights. France was a military might at that time frame. And they throw them off, and they succeed. And they stun the world. If any of you saw The Woman King, the Obogé, there was a Dahomey warrior named Grand Toya. Abadoya Toya is her formal name, or her given name through her processing, because she was one of these Dahomey warriors who protected the king, King Tezebuku. So it's about 75 years prior to the movie that you're seeing. But this training that they have is so intense, they're brainwashed. They are told that the king can do no wrong, so they are firmly entrenched in whatever the king is doing. He must have a divine right for what is happening. So even though they are taking over villages, when they take over a village, if you're a man, you only got 2 options. They're going to sell you in Ouida, because they don't trust you to integrate into their village, because they think you're going to run a new rebellion. Or they're going to cut off your head and put you on the palace, because they like to decorate. That decoration is power. So that's 2 options. Now, if you're a woman, you got 4 options. You got the Ouida option. We're going to sell you into enslavement. You may be palace decoration. If you look strong, we may make you a second wife, which is a Mino. 75 years, they call him Abogé, which is one of these protectors gang. But if you're cute and strong, you might make it and be one of the first wives, the treasured wives of the king. I am convinced that Grantoya was a second tier, that she, because of her name is Yorubanese, because this is the level of research we all do in order to get in there. We're breaking apart things because, unfortunately, often with women, you don't get letters. You don't get journals. So we've got to go pick apart piece by piece in order to find things. So literally breaking apart her name, it's Yorubanese in descent. So it's one of the villages that the Dahomey took over. And so Tezubuku saw her and decided that you can be an Eberge. She gets captured at some point and brought to Saint Domingue, which is present-day Haiti. And there, she now sees what this enslavement, this ruling of the king, what it really means. And so I envision, based on her actions, what she does next. She's given privileges because she knows herbs. Because if you could keep the enslaved alive longer, more healthy, that benefited the masses. But she's leading the kids through exercise. You know, if you kind of look back, it looks like troop movement. She had a plan, and one young man that she pours into explicitly, showing him how to move the troops in through the mountains based on astronomy, is Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the man who liberates Haiti. If you do not have, you don't have Abadoya, you do not have the prosecution of the war. When I found her, she was a footnote in a comic book. When I was here before, one of the testimonies was a woman from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and she's crying by the end of the presentation. She's like, "We always hear about the men." You know, there's so many rebellions happening in the West Indies during this time frame, and the only one that is successful is the one in Haiti. And I believe it's because you get these strong women coming from Africa. You get this participation. And my purpose, and I think these ladies share it, we need to bring these stories back to you. Because if you think that all our stories are nothing but the brutality of enslavement, otherwise known as pain porn, I'm going to show you this brutal scenario, and then we hope for a savior to come in. No, sometimes we were our saviors. Sometimes we found ways through the system. And those stories need to be as prevalent as the others. Because as a child, if you're growing up and you think that you were nothing but slaves, you don't want to know about history. And when you don't know about history, you repeat history. And so we're on a mission to I want power women. I want to tell these stories of the ancients.
It's also important, too, particularly at this time where you hear all this noise and nonsense about critical race theory. What we're talking about up here is American history. Okay, and it's very, very important to make sure that these stories are told and they're amplified so that our history doesn't get erased.
Exactly.
Yes.
And some people might have AAA coming for the face. So one of the things you talk about critical race people, this oppressive nature of not telling the whole story. And my firm belief is, look, history is jacked up, okay? There's a lot of stuff happened. It ain't nobody in this room's fault. It ain't your fault. You didn't do it. But the problem is, if we don't hear about it, we repeat it again. When I was doing research for Island Queen, there's a point where they began, the colonials were worried about women of color having this power because they were starting to make money in the system. And so they would stop you on the streets to ask to see your papers. They were asking for either your birth certificate or birth registry or your manumission papers, which is the way you were free. If you could not produce it in that moment in time, they could have you arrested, and you would have 3 weeks to prove that you were free, otherwise you would be sold. Now, in the islands, there's a lot of transport between the various islands. What if you were born in Montserrat and you're in Grenada and they're doing this? You're not going to get that paperwork in time. It was a way to get people returned into the system. And so when you think about Arizona a few years ago, checking people on the streets to see if you were a citizen or not, you see how history repeats itself. And so that's, in my opinion, that's why we have to know. So one of the things now I'm going to ask these ladies, because I have definite opinions about telling the whole history, which means the good, the bad, and the ugly. So when you're writing these stories, Madam Piper, Madam Wanda, how do you make the decision on what you're going to tell, other than adding up to the body count?
Well, Ann Lowe was in a child marriage. She was 12.
You need to say that one more time loud.
She was 12 when she was married. That's pretty ugly. And I've, heard about that across several reviews and people who, people who read my previous stuff and like, we didn't know, we weren't
ready.
Wow, I'm sorry about that, but that is her life. And it would, not be proper to show the trajectory of her life without showing everything she had been through in terms of this sad, winding, sorry, behind jerk who came along and, groomed her with food. It's believed that she was malnourished as a child, which contributed to her petite stature. And so one of the things he grooms her with is food that she would not have had access to otherwise. And used her in terms of her skills, in terms of her sewing skills. So, yeah, that part is part of the story. Part of the story is confirmed by her family that had to be told. So, and I think it gives the sense, once you know that and you know what she came from and how she got out of that situation, that allows you to root for her and to be with her and hope, right along with her that she's going to see better days in terms of her difficult journey. So yeah, that was a tough thing to begin with. We were like, you should have warned us. And yes, maybe, but this is, I think, part and parcel when you're writing about real life Black women, you're going to know that there's going to be difficulties. Yeah.
So, yeah, for me, on page 1, I've got, a woman describing that she has been brutally raped, as well as, 3 young men, 2 white, 1 Black, who have been killed for trying to help Black Mississippians get the right to vote. And people have often asked me, why do you start the story off, with such a horrific kind of opening? And the thought is, one, as far as women go, women were often raped in the South as a means of not only violent attack, but a means of demonstrating their power, not only over the women, but also the men, because purportedly the men could not save their women. So what makes a man feel less than the inability to protect the person that he loves, right? And so my character is not only raped by this man, but then he follows her all over town. And, he kind of winks and he makes all these gestures like, I can do it again, because he knew he could get away with it. And that was the brutality of the Jim Crow South. And in researching this book, not only just the Cheney Goodman Schwerner murders, but the attacks on women, it was very, very difficult to just read these firsthand accounts and see these pictures of these people who were brutalized. But again, as I made my point, I think that is part of our history, as Vanessa said, good, bad, and ugly. And if you're going to tell history, then get it right. Get it right.
Absolutely. And I'm going to throw my phone to Claire real quick.
Vanessa has a little situation with her car.
Hey, hold on a second. Claire's going to help you. Thank you so much. That was me. So that noisy, I don't know what I hit, but I hit something. And I was like, Lord, let me just get here, because I'm not stopping on these dark streets. I'm sorry. But research is extremely important. And one of the things I think that we three, no matter what genre you're writing, research is incredibly important. For me, for Island Queen, once again, women don't leave typically behind letters, journals. So I had to depend on other people talking about Dorothy in Island Queen. And that's where I got this crazy view of this woman. She is, whether she was poor or whether she was rich, she was a magnet for people. People wanted to converse with her. She had that level of charisma. And with Sister Mother Warrior, I had to translate French, guys. I had 4 years of high school French. I am by no means a translator. But Thomas Matteo does a his story about 10 years post the revolution. He actually interviews Mary Claire and the people who were still alive. And so from that translation, you find out, one, there was a bleach shortage. Like, it becomes important when you know that Mary Claire, dressed in all white, had all her women dressed in all white, to lead on a mule train, which is one of these decisions is kind of like weird. Why would you wear white on a mule? Mules are not clean animals. I know why you have a bleach shortage right now. But she and her girls ride in on a mule train, and they go to Jacmel, and they literally save the city of Jacmel from starvation because they bring food and medicine in 1800s. I believe that she is the first battlefield nurse. She predates Mary Seacole and Florence Nightingale by 30 years. But we don't know about her attributes because it's all wrapped up in this thing of not giving women their pearls or their due. For System of the Warrior, when I'm translating it, I find that Jean-Jacques Dessalines likes to dance. And what he would do is he'd have a party with drums, and he would bring the people down. The Taínos in the mountains. So one of the other things that I found in this research was the whole island came together. So you had the Taino Indians in the mountains coming down to party with Jean-Jacques with his drums as he's getting everybody together to go and overthrow the French in this last push and everything. The humanity that's hidden in this world, because, if you've read, if you were fortunate enough to talk about Jean-Jacques Dessalines in your history books, depending upon when those history books are written, they'll try and say he's a mass murderer, he's done all these evil things. But when you go back to the actual record, it's a very different case of who this man is. And so part, I think, of which we all three do is try to bring you back their humanity. Sometimes that humanity is not pretty. Being in a child marriage, being, a good girl that's got knocked up problems in the 60s and whatnot. Bringing these different things to bed. But I think we all respect history enough that we go to the links to find the stories to bring it to you. So Piper, talk to us a little bit about your research process.
Well, in Ann Lowe's case, as I said, because, designers, you know how it works. Somebody's wearing something and someone asks, who did your gown, your outfit, or whatever, then the wearer says the name. So it's hard when Ann Lowe, who was known as society's best kept secret, did not get the name said often enough for people to know the extent to which she designed multiple dresses, not just for Jackie Kennedy, but for Vanderbilt, Roosevelt, the DuPonts, Marjorie Merriweather Post. I got a note in the review that the fact that Mar-a-Lago appears in my book took them out of the story. And I said, well, somebody else owned it before he did. It was Marjorie Merriweather Post who built it. I mean, what, you're going to give me like take a star off because of that? I can't help the history of the place. But, that didn't help matters any in terms of finding out what could be found out. And then other people were like, oh, I wish she had written a diary or whatever. Black women are busy surviving. They do not have time to write a diary for us to discover and give you the exact, this is what she felt on that day. Particularly in terms of Ann Lowe's case, all she wanted to do was make these dresses. And to the extent to which she got a second husband, and he left out because she was obsessed with making her gowns. They could be in the middle of some fun times, and if some vision came to her head, she got out the bed and was drawing it. So poor Caleb, he didn't get the attention, because this was her obsession. So research makes those things, it's a sort of a shift in the way that you have to think about the research in the case of a particular subject like this. Fortunately, a scholar by the name of Margaret Powell, who was a textile scholar, did her thesis graduating from Corcoran Art School in 2012 on Ann Lowe. She pulled together certain things in terms of writing her thesis and analyzing some of the gowns that she had access to. And she interviewed some of Anne's descendants, namely her granddaughter, Audrey, who was still living at that time, in order to ask her some questions about her life, etc. So that particular thesis that I was able to get a hold of helped me in terms of figuring out some of the factual signposts of her life, and then using fiction, being able to connect them to tell the story. So the book is dedicated to Margaret, who unfortunately died at 38 of breast cancer. And she was in the process of writing what is sorely needed about Ann Lowe, a comprehensive scholarly biography, and getting together the exhibit of the gowns. So by the time I wrote the dedication, I hope that the book would plant a seed that would bring those things to fruition. And then when it was even going through editing process, came to find out that the Winter Fair in Delaware next year will be having an Ann Lowe exhibit. There will be 40 gowns. Yes. It'll be from September 9th until early January, right? And it's commemorating the 70th wedding anniversary of Jack and Jackie. And they have been recreating, they have a fascinating Instagram of showing how they've been restoring and recreating Jackie's dress. One of the most photographed wedding dresses in history, by the way. So one part of that is done, mission accomplished, and there's just the other part we got to get for her.
Spotlighting women in history, people that deserve their pearls, I think that is so needed. And then spotlighting movements, because you didn't pick out a particular person in history, but the Voting Rights Acts, these different movements. Talk to us a little bit about that research.
So yeah,
it's not killing, but it's important.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a way to provide both in a book. So yeah, for Anywhere You Run, I started the book because I just finished up my first project, and I was looking around, trying to figure out what am I going to write about next. And we had just come through the 2020 election, and so there was all this noise about, election fraud and the big lie. And, of course, I had witnessed with my own two eyes all the long lines that people had been standing in just to place a vote. And so it got me thinking, that might be kind of cool to write about, but I couldn't really figure out a contemporary angle for the story. And so I decided to research the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, confession time, okay, because these ladies, they are like historical, gurus,
I mean, you didn't translate any French?
I did not translate any French, no ma'am. I did not. I walked into the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American history and culture, and walked up to the librarian and I said, here's what I want to write about. And he said, I got you. And he opened up all these, papers and books and directed me on line of things that I should look into. And so because remember, this was my first foray into historical, and so I was very, very conscious of what I did not know. Like, I knew there were certain things I did not know, or things I'd heard, but I wanted to make sure that they were accurate. And so my research entailed all of that, reading these books, these papers. But because my story dealt with a movement and these particular people in the movement, I also wanted to make sure that these characters sounded very realistic to the time period. And so I read a ton of old magazines, Life and Ebony and Jet, and something called Tan I had not even heard of. And I listened to a lot of old music. I listened to a lot of music around that time, including civil rights anthems. I listened to, Frank Sinatra, the Marvelettes. I mean, anybody who was making music during that time, because that also spoke to what people were doing and thinking and concerned about. And so, again, like I said, because, I'm not the historical gurus that you are, I made sure that what I was doing, because these are fictional characters after all, right? I wanted to make sure that they felt real and authentic. And so that's why I delved into so much about this period of time, because, you may have gotten some sense of what was going on about the civil rights movement, but, did you know that, in Jackson, Mississippi, there was a little small office, and this is where they ran the Mississippi Summer Project. They sent lawyers down from the north to help out. There was this small wedge of time right after the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, where white segregationists decided we will not follow the law. So now the law of the land says you must admit blacks into your restaurants, your hotels, your buses, what have you. And these folks said, no, we will not do it. So the Summer Project sent testers, what they call testers, down to go and try and check into hotels and to walk into the front door of movie theaters, so that they could take this information back and show that these people were not following the law. And this is how treacherous segregation was. Some people would close their businesses rather than let blacks in. Like, you are now working against your own interests because your hate runs that deep. So I wanted to make sure that I included all of that research that came about.
And I think you do a brilliant job, because the research, even as we're not giving you nonfiction text, we're not doing nonfiction biographies, we're giving you an engaging story that is based on history. So you get just enough, Wanda does just enough about the struggle and the strife, but you still, the focal point is, what are these sisters doing? What are they going to do? How are they going to survive? And who's after them? In Piper's, you get Anne's picture of Anne in ways that, were shocking in some elements, but you see a real, fully holistic version of this person. For me, for Sister Mother Warrior, I wanted you to get to know Abadoya Toya's plight. She is a woman who was based on the patriarchy. The king is always right. And now you're in Santa Domingue, and now you understand enslavement, and now you know enslavement is wrong. Now you know the king was wrong. How does that change a person? What do they have to go through to get to that level? For Mary Claire, she and Jean-Jacques are born in the same year, which freaked me out. That they are the same year. There's so much twins. They have twins. This is, first of all, there are not enough black love stories in history. That is one of the black love stories in histories that we should know about. It is a long-term investment as they are growing up, but she has never been enslaved, so she has a different point of view. He has been enslaved. He has a different point of view. And once again, there are different aspects of the revolution that you can clearly see Mary Claire's imprint on. Particularly, the final constitution, as Jean-Jacques passes, everybody's black. Doesn't matter if you're white. Doesn't matter if you're French. Doesn't matter if you're black, you're colored, because unfortunately there was that distinction that there was black, colored, and white. Everybody's black. And you can see her imprint on how that world shapes. So returning these people holistically, but in an engaging story, is what writers are crafting on. But I just wanted to get you guys just a little sense, because I know this girl worked hard. I know she worked hard. I know I work hard to get you guys this level of information. So now we kind of peeling back this onion. Let's talk about process. What do you like about the writing process? What do you don't like about writing process? And when do you know you're done?
Ooh, why don't you answer that first? How do you know when you're done? Because your books are so good that you kind of don't want them to end. So how do you know when? I'll stick a fork in it.
Stick a fork in it. Okay, so my goal is a little different. So there's a lot, as Piper talked about, there's a lot of stories that need to be told. I am looking for a particular type of woman. I want a power story. I want a woman who, the beginnings might be rough, but in the end, she is a survivor. She's a champion. She has, she's shaped her life. For the good, the bad, the ugly, she shaped her life and she's got control. So that tells me the end point of a story. I'm not going to take you cradle to grave in some stories. I'm going to take you from cradle or little, young person, etc., to moment of triumph, because that's where I want to leave you, because too many people turn away from history because history is jacked up. I'm just, it is what it is, right? But we got to understand all that. So those are the women I'm looking for. And to me, it always astounds me. Like a woman like in Island Queen, Dorothy Kerwin Thomas was a famous woman during her day. She is one of the wealthiest women in the West Indies. She starts out her life enslaved. She buys the freedom of her family. She goes on to build businesses across the West Indies. She has an affair with Prince William, future King William IV. And then goes on to save generational wealth for black women and women of color in Demerara, which is present-day Guyana. Her will is archived in the UK, and nobody knew this woman's name. So it's a systematic erasure of somebody who doesn't look like everybody else. This is a beautiful, dark-skinned woman who, when I was doing the research, guys, I honestly thought she was mulatto, because usually the closer adjacency you have to white, the more power. This woman was chocolate. Sexual chocolate, beautiful chocolate. She was chocolate. And but that's the charisma this woman had and the gumption. And I wanted to do honor to this woman, because we should know her name. She should literally be in our history books for the things she did. And so I found a power moment. That's where I know the end. To do all the rest, I look at the world. I look at what's going on in the world. Everybody, even though we have the internet and TikTok and Twitter and all this sort of stuff, and to find out what's going on, they had people writing letters, typically men, writing letters telling you what's going on. They had people in these ports. As soon as you got to a port, you knew what was happening. So people understood the wars that are happening in other parts of the world. They knew what was going on. Trade brought everybody together, because you needed all that. You needed the islands for the sugar and the rum and the coffee and et cetera, all these different things. Everybody knew what was going on. So returning that to you from their viewpoint, I think gives you a little something about the world they're living in. So for me, that's when I know, when I can tell you, when I can have that character speak about the world, then I know I've done enough research. Because now I've got the end point. So this is almost like a backwards process. I've got the end point. I've got what they're going on through their lives, and you bring in the world. That's how I know that I'm done from a research standpoint. And for me, the first time I have learned to write a third of word count, whatever the word count is. So typical, these books are 90 to 120,000. First time pass is a third, because they're standing in white floors, in white rooms, in white houses, wearing white clothes with white skies. It's the motivation, the goals to get you through. And then the second and third layers, which I love the second and third layers, because that's where I'm sharpening the motivation. I'm dressing these women, I'm giving them the part, dressing the men. Like, y'all chapeaus, I must say. Back in history, y'all. I got to give you your dues because I want you to feel like you're there in whatever I'm writing. And so those are the layers we go through, and that's how I get to the end when I'm on that third or fourth path. Now you got to answer.
So for me, my writing process is a bit messy. I'm a bit of a dinosaur because I write all my first drafts in longhand, like legal pad, blue Pilot G2 gel ink pen. Always has to be. Now, when I do revisions, it has to be a red pen. Okay, so I will start off a first draft, and much like Vanessa, that draft, people don't have clothes. They're standing in netherworlds. I haven't put the descriptions on, but what I'm trying to do there, because for me, what comes easiest, what comes first is dialogue. So I don't have characters necessarily talking to me, but I hear conversations in my head. Characters in my books are talking to one another. And so, like Vanessa said, I'm, trying to find their motivation. So I'm getting that dialogue down, and then I go back and layer on after that. Now, given that this book was so heavily researched, I actually had to also decide what will I put in, what will I not put in, because there was a lot there. And because I tend to write in the thriller genre, the story has to move fast. And so I know that I needed to, take a snippet here, put it in, but I couldn't languish over that because thrillers are supposed to be fast paced. And so I spent a lot of time just trying to decide, what am I going to put in, because there's so much in the civil rights movement. Just in 1964 alone, you had Medgar Evers and all that research and work that he did to try and get voting rights for blacks. And then after I have a sizable portion handwritten, then I start to put it into the computer. And I'm editing as I'm putting it into the computer. This is where it gets messy. And so I'm editing, I'm putting in handwritten, and then I'm thinking, let me go back to that handwritten page that had blah, 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 blah. And so that process is kind of the lengthier process, just trying to get all of that in and into not only a story that's, historically accurate and rich, but also characters that are engaging and feel authentic. And so that's kind of my process. It's kind of messy, but we get there eventually.
And now Dr. Huguley.
Well, at least by her own design, the editor wanted to know if it was possible to end the story on a note of hope. So I had that end point already figured out. In terms of that, when, a place where Anne, at least at some point in her life, got her flowers and understood, the contribution that she had made. And it was something that happened in Tampa, Florida, which really was, I think, the home of her heart. Even though she lived in New York for many years, many decades, it was really where she was most appreciated. And found, engaged with the woman who was her patron. So I called Josephine Lee her patron, that saw her artistry and sponsored it and saw to it that it was brought forward, that it was shared. She staked her in terms of her education. She staked her in terms of her shop. She staked her money when it was time for Anne and let her go to New York. And I looked everywhere in terms of trying to figure out, this Josephine Lee, was she for real like this? And she was. Even her great-grandson has been in touch with me, talking about the ways in which his great-grandmother believed in this woman's talent to that extent. So that was the end point. And of course, as I said, it's really the events of her life. And again, more or less in this kind of book, figuring out what could stay in and what could come out. She had many shops. I couldn't put readers through all of the shops that she had that came and went. she had a much more tempestuous relationship with Sonia. Her great-granddaughter kind of was taking me to task about that I didn't tell all this stuff. I was like, Miss Linda, that's what can go in the miniseries. We can't do that in a novel, or people will not read the novel in the first place. So things like that, you have to make those decisions in terms of that. But as for process, I tend to be a bit of a pantser. I'm writing around in some of the scenes that I see first, and then I'll just go ahead in and just... I'm pretty straight in terms of thinking about it, particularly in this kind of book, where the events of somebody's life shapes the structure of the novel. So,
The one thing I didn't add is, like, how do I know when my book is done? I always have to, because I write about, murder and thrillers, I always make sure that my stories end on two notes. One, that there's some justice, that there has to be some justice in the world, even though sometimes in real life there isn't. My books will always have some sense of justice. And then second, like Piper said, they end in hope. And so even though you have a bit of a, murder and mayhem mess, the characters will still have some hope, some sense of hope.
And that's why I love, as we started, that's why I love the place we are in. Because there were times where our stories would have to be, pain porn centric, someone else being a savior to the stories. And now you're seeing us being able to add our creativity, take the historical record, and present a story in sensitive ways, in deep ways, in meaningful ways, to encourage everyone who reads these stories about these incredible women and men that lived during these time frames, or these incredible stories they actually lived out of Wanda's book at the end. It's an exciting place.
They did.
Before we move to your questions, we're going to ask what is next for this. And these are good Christmas gifts. I'm just saying, these are good Christmas books. But what do we have to look forward to next year, or 2023/2024? Starting with you, Piper.
American Daughters, which will be a side-by-side historical fiction of Alice Roosevelt, who is the daughter of Theodore Roosevelt, and Portia Washington, who's the daughter of Booker T. Washington. So it's like you have the white princess and the black princess, and they were actually friends. And had very similar beginnings to their lives and very similar trajectories in terms of their lives. And so we don't get a lot of stories of interracial friendship, and this will be one. So that is the book that I'm working on right now.
So for me, I am returning back to the contemporary vein.
No, you're supposed to stay.
I know, right? So I am currently working on my third book, which is about a young woman who's overcoming some substantial grief and loss. And she returns home to coastal Georgia, down near the Brunswick, Sapelo Islands area. And she has to kind of overcome all her personal problems in order to save a black landowner when she uncovers a scheme that threatens the generational wealth of black families. And so it's a book about what it means to have a home and generational wealth. And so, yeah, look for that next year. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, for me, only 2 books next year. only 2.
Slacker.
I know I'm slacking. So I'll tell the book that I'm currently writing now is Murder in Drury Lane. It's the follow-up Murder in Westminster. So if you're following the Lady Abigail's tales, I take you back to 1806 London. This is a time frame where London is in complete chaos. You've got Lord Nelson has just died. He's the father of the British Navy. William Pitt, the man in Parliament who's been pushing all the bills through, he dies in February. And of course, with Haiti being free, all the abolition movements in the world stop. kind of like, we were good with y'all, being free, but now y'all want to run stuff? I don't know about that. And so Lady Worthing is a character who I said, what if you're a free person of color? Someone who has agency. She's got money. And you think the world is about to become right, and now all of a sudden it's going wrong. What do you do? So Lady Worthing, kind of in the style of Easy Rawlins, you're going to do life with her, but then people keep dying around her. So in Murder in Westminster, her curmudgeon neighbor, who might be a sexy Moriarty type, his wife is found dead on the fence between their two properties on Abby's side. So Abby got to solve this because she ain't going down for that. And Murder in Drury Lane, her place of respite, there's been a series of murders, and potentially one of the suspects is a man in Parliament who may be the last vote for the current abolition bills. So if she brings him down, abolition may not happen. So that's Murder in Drury Lane. But the book of my heart, coming out in July, is Queen of Exiles. This is the story of Queen Louise. Queen Louise, like if everybody watched Bridgerton, they kind of, fudge a little stuff. This is a true story of the Kingdom of Haiti. They were wealthy, they were opulent. You have King Christophe, who unfortunately is suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome because he was in the American Revolution, he was in the Haitian revolutions, and he believes that if he can bring this kingdom to a point that the Europeans would respect them, that would keep France from coming back, because he knew France was coming back. And so he's building the citadel and he's over militarizing. And even though she loves him dearly, he's going through this spiral and she's trying to pull him back. But then there is a coup that happens and she goes to Europe. She and her daughters are able to escape. She has to rebuild his fortune because they have to survive in Europe. And she literally rebuilds that fortune and reigns as a queen in Europe. It's a true story of Queen Louise. Queen of Exiles will be coming out in July of 2023. Tell all your friends. Tell everybody. I work hard on that. I translate a little bit more French for that one. But to me, this is a story that should be in our history books. What this woman did, what she survived, what she and her daughters did. They, in essence, Henri wanted to be respected by all the European powers. She showed that when she was in Europe. She was respected by all the European powers. Their kingdom was respected. And it's a story, once again, that's plain as day in the history books if you were paying attention, and has been erased. And we're bringing it back. Queen of Exiles, July 2023.
Questions?
The question is, when and how did I first meet Ann Lowe? As I said, I've read all stuff about the Kennedys. I've always was knowing about the Kennedys. So I always knew about her in the back of my mind, looking for who were the black people that the Kennedys knew, kind of thing. But I just happened to be on Twitter one night when my editor tweeted out an article about Ann Lowe. And said, who's going to write this novel for me? And so I looked at the article and I went on the internet and looked at a couple of other things and said, it'll be me, I will. And sent those prologue pages to my agent and said, tell Tessa not to let anybody else on this. I'm on it. And so that's how I got the contract in terms of that. So, It was like 2019. Yes. So, yeah. And Tessa has found several people like that. But of course, it probably helped that I already knew Tessa from some other conferences and stuff before that.
Kind of helped that you're actually a scholar in a lot of this stuff. So,
I don't know if that helped, but I think that it helped that she knew I could write historically and that she knew that, so
and
that
you did a wonderful job. Wonderful job. What do we got? Don't be shy. You see, we're just.
I know you have done several signings. Do you have, each of you have a memorable
Okay.
The question is, I know you've all done signings. Do you have a memorable book signing?
This one right here, because it's a bucket list items I can check off.
For me, I guess because I'm the old head in the group, when recently, my very first book, so number one, we're on book 23-ish slash 25-ish, and they had the first book, and they brought it. And as an author, you're like, I know so much more now. I'm like, oh, I'm horrified. But to see this woman and proudly bring it to a signing, it blew me away. Anytime, every signing is special because when you get the chance to just talk to somebody and they're excited about what you're writing or they're excited about a story, it is just phenomenal. But every one of them is exciting. But that was very memorable.
Oh yeah. I was just going to say. I agree. It took me a long time to get here, y'all, to this space because I was busy off doing all this other stuff that I thought that I was supposed to be doing. When in fact, I am now standing in a place as an author, and I feel like this has been God's purpose for me. And so anytime I'm at a book signing and somebody says, can you sign my book? I will be out here till 3 o'clock in the morning if there's enough people out here who want me to sign books. But one that was really special for me was during the summer, I did an event, and I saw this woman in the back, and I kept looking at her, and she was somebody that I had gone to high school with, and it's been a long time since I was in high school. And she's like, I have been following your success, and I just had to come out. And that kind of touched me because I hadn't seen her since I graduated from high school. Yeah. I'm sorry I cut somebody off. Somebody over here had a question.
Are you all local to the Atlanta area, and are you really writing under your real given name?
So the
Piper
question.
Huguley.
Oh, let me repeat the question. The
Go
question
ahead.
was, are we all local authors, and are we all writing under our real names?
Piper Huguley is my real name.
Your name was the one that made me ask the question.
Yes, it is.
I'm local. Vanessa is part of my real name, but not the rest. My mom's maiden name is Riley because I was told very early on that my formal name could sell textbooks, not fiction. So I was like, oh, okay, let's see what we got here. But my mom's maiden name is Riley, so I was like, oh, Vanessa Riley, my middle name, Vanessa Riley. Doesn't that sound nice? Yeah, we go with that.
So yeah, I'm local, and it's so funny because I was originally going to write under the name W. Michelle Morris, which is my name. And I went to a conference before my book was published, and I was like, I'm gonna try this name out, right? So I had to make up my badge that said W. Michelle Morris. I walked around that conference for 4 days, and people were calling me Michelle, and I was not even answering. I was just like, Michelle, and I'm like, and they'd have to tell, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot my name is Michelle. So I decided, let's just go with what I know. See. Yeah. So, and that's my given name. It is also my maiden name. My husband is back there, and his name, do not call him Mr. Morris. His name is Anthony Hightower, but people have done that. Like, oh, Mr. Morris, it's so nice to meet you. But yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lady in a black and gray sweater. Oh, we're gonna come back to you. We're just gonna.
I just wondered, listening to you talk, it sounds like your genres kind of are a meld of things. Do you consider yourselves novelists, historians, storytellers, or all of the above?
Did everybody hear the question?
In terms of that, I'm not a trained historian, but as a literature scholar, I have found it increasingly hard to teach the literature of the time period, what I call from Civil War to civil rights without talking about the history. So I've had to become, you know, yes, in terms of that over the years, our children do not know their history. It's one of the things that as a professor of literature has pushed me to learning more history so that it could be more or less put into my classes so that the students can learn that as well because, they don't know. And so, for me, at least, I'm all three.
So before the second book, I said, I just write thrillers. That's all I do. And then when I got this idea for the second book, I was like, well, I'm going to write a historical thriller. And now I'm writing my third book, and I'm like, oh, so I'm a thriller writer who writes historical and horror because the book spills a little into horror. So now I've just started calling myself a storyteller because my stories have a little bit of everything in them.
For me, I'm a storyteller foremost. My mother was literature, so she stressed Thoreau and Baldwin and Shakespeare. And my father, from Trinidad and Tobago, was a storyteller. And half of what he told me was true. And so it's a great meld. But what you're also hearing is the different genres. So like I write historical mystery, so that's the genre will get different story elements. I write historical romance, that has a different element. And then I love historical fiction / biographical historical fiction, so that's a different element. To tell these stories well, you got to know the history. And unfortunately, sometimes you got to go farther than some people would have to return. Because there's a thing called historical accuracy. And there's always a debate because hey, it's fiction. It should be made up, right? No. If I can find the history, I want to bring it back to you. So I will go to the nth degree to find it and bring it back because I want you to feel like you're there. I want you to understand what these people saw and felt and ate and what they were wearing and those types of things. So a little bit of a historian, very much a storyteller, but all the time a novelist because I'm going to give you an engaging end-to-end story that's going to bring it all home.
This lady here had a question. Go ahead.
Hi. What are your literary foremothers, and how do you place yourself in what I would call a second renaissance of Black women creativity and telling stories, including playwrights, people like Attica Locke, who I always followed as a mystery writer, but now has the Netflix
Screenwriter, yep.
right from scratch.
From scratch.
Really very exciting. So putting yourself in the past and in the contemporary moment in terms of what's happening with creativity.
Shoot, I want to be Attica Locke when I grow up. She's always been like my mentor from afar. Y'all know she created Empire, right? She created Empire, and the wild and wacky thing is she created Empire based on the Plantagenet history of Eleanor of Aquitaine and her husband, King Henry. All of that lion stuff is all, that's how she created that show. It is like so brilliant how she did that. Empire. She created that show, was a staff writer. So yeah, she's my long-term goal. So I'd say it's sort of if there was a contemporary person that I would aim for that. But Zora Neale Hurston, I did her in my dissertation and I teach her and so a lot of her work has informed me.
Yeah. For me, it is Maya Angelou. I love the fact that her lines are lyrical, even when it's not a poem, which means the whole work is actually a poem to the soul. So I follow that. Audre Lorde has become a new one for me that's bringing about. Beverly Jenkins is more of a contemporary because in the midst of a sweeping story, you're going to be engrossed in the history. To me, that's a signature. And there's many more, but those are the ones that really, really drive me.
So for me, I have to say it has to be Toni Morrison. And she was actually, her quote was actually the driving force that got me to put pen to paper and write the first scenes of my first book, because she said, if you cannot find the book you want to read, then you must write it. And I love thrillers and mysteries, but I have like stacks and stacks of them at home by Harlan Coben and John Grisham and David Baldacci and Scott Turow and all these other wonderful writers, but their stories didn't speak to me. They had characters, main characters, who were great and fantastic, but they didn't look like me. And that was the reason why I started All Her Little Secrets. And so she is like an indelible inspiration for me. I guess in the contemporary vein, it would have to be Attica Locke. I love Attica Locke's stories. She is a storyteller. Yeah.
You know, my question started somewhere else, my point was somewhere else. I love the genre of mystery. And all the authors you spoke of are authors I've read and loved for years. And so All Our Little Secrets is something I've read. I didn't know when we were coming to a friend of mine said, let's, on our book clubs, let's go to this. Well, a few days ago, I was looking at Facebook, and I said, oh, this is really cool. I said, is this where we're going? I was so thrilled and excited, and to hear the sense of biographical fiction speaks to my heart. I grew up in a history teacher's home, and so the accuracy and the storytelling that you all spoke of made me think of Stacey Adams. I mean, sorry, what's her name? Stacey Abrams. Too much wine. Of the story of someone whose flowers of the foundation that she's not winning, but she's winning. And what you spoke of about women in power in the stories, I can't wait to read your stories.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Did that clear?
She's
She's
like
like
for one more question.
hovering.
We have one more?
We have time for one more question.
There she is.
I wanted to ask, how did Jackie Kennedy meet your character?
All of those high society connections. There was a cousin who Ann Lowe had designed for from Philadelphia, and she came to New York for a commission and was very pleased with it, and let Jackie's mother, Janet Auchincloss, it's a piece of work, know about it. Ann Lowe designed her wedding dress, her wedding outfit, when she married Hugh Auchincloss after her nefarious first husband, Jackie's father. She married wealthy Hugh Auchincloss, and Ann Lowe designed that. And this was the beginning in 1947 of, like I said, not just a family seamstress or a one-off thing, but a relationship with this family that lasted for decades. So she designed Jackie's Deb dresses when she was Deb of the Year, her sister Lee's Deb dress when she was Deb of the Year. She couldn't design Lee's wedding dress because Lee thought she could get it somewhere cheaper. She went to Pauline Trezier and tried, but then she added on all this other stuff, and then Ann Lowe was like, see, I told you, right? But Jackie's half-sister, Janet, she had a relationship with the family that lasted quite a long time.
Well, please join me in thanking our three authors tonight, Piper Huguley, Vanessa Riley, and Wanda Morris. Thank you all so much. It was just a wonderful conversation. And I know that all of you are eager to get your books signed, so just bear with us for one moment as we transition out to the lobby and get these ladies set up to sign your books. If you have been listening and you haven't gotten your book yet and you're ready to buy it now, we're ready to sell it to you. Just right out here at this table, we have all of their books for sale, 25% off tonight only. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it.